Welcome all you wiretappers out there, back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. I'm here on the Zoom call with Gavin Schmitt up in Milwaukee. And Gavin, we just lost your lighting.
Hold on.
It's okay.
All right, that's going to be part of this.
The
room gives me about 20 minutes before the lights go out.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, and is that going to happen in another 20 minutes? So
it probably will, but
okay,
we'll just go with it.
All right. We'll just, and don't worry about it. We'll still be going, but I'll just stop a bit. You get up and reset them and we'll go. We don't have to make a big deal out of it because I can cut that out easily. I'll just make a note of the time when that's happening so I can find it easily. It's a piece of paper. Okay. All right. Welcome all you wiretappers out there, back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. I'm here in the studio and on a Zoom call with my new friend Gavin Schmitt from up in Milwaukee. First thing, a little commercial. Don't forget to hit me up on Venmo at Gangland Wire. Support the podcast once in a while. Buy me a Starbucks coffee. Buy me one of those expensive coffees. Some people even buy me a shot and a beer every once in a while, or just buy me a diner coffee, for 10 cents. You used to be able to get one of those, but you can't get one of those for 10 cents anymore. You can also hit the store button or the donate button on the webpage if you want to, Gangland Wire, and I appreciate it. And Gavin, welcome.
Glad to be here. It's really an honor. I think you might be the original Gangland podcast.
Gavin, I think you're right. I look back and I see all these guys that got their mob podcast, but I look back and they weren't anywhere. And when I started, there was one other guy that I could find because I looked around for him. There was a guy up in New York that had one, and he kind of tried to act like he was a gangster too. And I don't know if it lasted or not. It was to me, it kind of turned me off trying to listen to it. But I'm not denigrating competition. I don't need to do that. But shortly after I started that one with Gimlet, which is a big time podcasting company, started called Mafia. And they've been going ever since. Not as long as I have, and they even had me on their show a couple of times. So anyhow, welcome. And you are the quintessential expert on the Milwaukee mob, which I've been wanting to do this for quite a while. I just get sidetracked and distracted with all the different mob stories and throughout the United States. Kansas City has this connection with the Milwaukee mob with Frank Balistrieri or Fancy Pants. I've even got a transcript from the Las Vegas entrepreneur that they had co-opted that owned the Stardust, Alan Glick. And he claims that Nick Savella threatened him once and also told Frank DeLuna to get in a car and drive up and straighten Fancy Pants out. And I understand that that was a derogatory nickname for him. So I'm really excited to have you on there. Welcome, Gavin.
It's like I said, it's great to be here. Known about the podcast a long time. Never thought I'd be asked. So
tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this Mafia thing? You've got more than one book. I'm going to put up a picture of your let's see, share screen.
There we go.
So there you go. Tell me a little bit about that's better. Okay, so tell me a little bit about how you got into this. What's your history? What's your background?
Completely unlike probably anybody else. I never had an interest in organized crime. Nothing of the sort. My background, what I went to school for was philosophy. And part of that I was already curious since I was a child, but that only made me more curious. It's like, you just learn to ask questions. And when, I started hearing about the Milwaukee Mafia, and granted, as people on the YouTube can see, I'm a little on the younger side, so it's before my time. But when I heard about it, I was like, I would like to know a lot more about this. And when I started looking, there weren't any books, there weren't any movies. It was really just a big empty area. And my curiosity won't allow that. So I had to start doing it myself, gathering the newspaper articles and the FBI documents and everything else. Over the last however many years now, 10, 15 years, I've become the expert by default. Not that it was anything I ever intended to do, just because now I'm in a position where I'm the person who has all the material.
Yeah.
So
interesting. That's cool. Okay, there's his other book, Milwaukee
Yep.
Mafia: Images of America, in paperback. Get both these books on Amazon, of course, folks. Highly recommend you get them. You have any interest at all in the Midwest mob, because of all the three major families: Kansas City, Chicago, and Milwaukee. They were an integral part of that, and an integral part of helping to control the Teamsters Union and the Teamsters pension fund. They had their own band in place up there. So let's talk a little bit about, maybe you want to go clear back to the first origins of the Milwaukee Mafia family.
Okay, want to go that far back?
Started back east. I don't really know anything about that before Frank Balistrieri. Let's touch base on that a little bit.
Okay, well, we're going way back, because it's, as far as I can tell, it's at least as far back as 1903. There might have been a couple guys before that, but it wasn't anything that anybody knew was going on. But yeah, around 1903, a man named Vito Guardalabene came over from Sicily, from a small town called Santa Flavia, which is just north of Palermo. And he came over with a handful of his crew, and he brought some of his family members, family with a small F, and it just kind of grew from there. So he was the boss for a while. His son was the boss for a while. There were a couple other guys in between. John Alioto becomes the boss in the 50s, and then Frank Balistrieri, who everybody knows, is the son-in-law of John Alioto. So he took over after that. I mean, so long before Frank was the big name that he was, there was mob activity in Milwaukee for 50 plus years. It never really gathered the attention from the media the way that Frank did. He didn't shy away from the media, which really was probably part of his downfall.
Yeah, I would have to ask now about during Prohibition. They were probably overshadowed by Capone, but they had to be, because of geographically, they were ideally suited to work with smugglers to get beer and whiskey in from Canada, particularly whiskey. I think Capone pretty much made his own beer, I think, in the Canadian Ace Distributing Company. I can't remember the exact name of it, but they had to be really connected to Capone and smuggling alcohol in from Canada.
Yes and no. So they were definitely the Canadian smuggling part, yes. And Milwaukee sort of has a unique position in Prohibition history, in that where that's many mafia, families sort of, by the time they blew up huge, Milwaukee, not as much. Really? Because Milwaukee never really enforced Prohibition. being the city with all the breweries and a heavily German population, it wasn't as hard to get a drink or as frowned upon. So they didn't require people to smuggle as much as in maybe other cities.
That is so interesting, Gavin, because I mean, even in modern times, as they legalize marijuana, the price drops.
Mhm.
as the supply isn't increased, the price drops. So there wasn't as much money. So during Prohibition in Chicago, where there was a lot of enforcement activity, in Kansas City, a lot of enforcement activity, then you can make a lot more money because you could charge a lot more money, and it was much riskier, but you get paid for that risk. That is really interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah, anybody who was, well, not anybody, but the Germans, the Irish, anybody who, not to stereotype, but who has sort of that background,
Oh yeah,
they all have family members who know how to make their own
yeah.
stills. So they didn't have to import all that much.
That is interesting. That there is much more of a cultural thing. Alcohol, German immigrants and Irish immigrants, the alcohol was much more part of the culture. Whereas the
Mhm.
English, for some reason, they're more the Puritan influence, I think, is where all that came from. And that there was a huge, English were running all the reins of government in the 1920s, turn of the century. And they really cracked down on alcohol and prostitution and all vice activities right after the 1920s. So
Mhm.
that is really interesting. I never thought about that. Well, let's get
Yeah,
back to Alioto and Balistrieri. How did Balistrieri? He married his daughter.
he did. How did he what?
How did what was his kind of roots? My interest in a lot of our listeners, my listeners, I call wiretappers, and our wiretappers' interest is really in that around that skimming stuff, and that was where Balistrieri really came into the national media, that got national attention because he
Right.
got so involved with that. But where did Balistrieri come from? I mean, what is he a young thug in the 20s and 30s and moved on up like a lot of them?
Yeah, he's sort of a mysterious character to me. He grows up, his father and his uncle own a hauling business, and they ended up becoming quite rich during World War II because the city of Milwaukee had garbage trucks, but then during World War II, because of gas rationing, they stopped using the trucks and they brought the horse and the wagon back. And they hired the Balistrieri brothers, Frank's father and uncle, to be their trash haulers. So they ended up getting some very lucrative city contracts off of that. And so Frank grew up with money. He was well off. He went to law school. He dropped out of law school because he owned a bar and a hotel. So he decided that wasn't worth even finishing law school when he's already got a bar and a hotel. So why he ever really decided to go into crime or make a play for boss, I don't know. I mean, it must be something in someone's mentality or something, because he could have lived out his life comfortably and never done it. So I don't know. Like, he's not one of these guys who's scrapping on the streets trying to just survive and then make something of themselves. He could have just been laid back and confident. I don't know. I'm not really sure what that turning point was for him, unless it was just because of the fact that his father and his uncle were, and then his father-in-law was. And I don't know for a fact, but presumably it was an arranged marriage, because I don't know, but I'm under the impression that the two fathers probably sort of pushed them together. That seems to be fairly standard.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, kind of old school, old world there kind of thing.
Yeah.
That marriages back then, especially, were even like a small county I was from. The sons and daughters of the large farmers tended to marry each other, which then created a combination of large farms and even larger farms and people that worked together. So anyhow, he's coming up through the 30s, and there's not much prohibition going on. I assume that they had to get into gambling pretty soon, have any kind of vice activities. And I know those farmers and Germans and Irish guys that settled this country like to gamble. So I'm sure he got into that. What was his early forays into the gambling business?
He definitely did. it's tricky to know some things because a lot of times we know when people were doing things because it's the crime of the day that the media or the police decided that they were enforcing. I'm sure you understand that very well.
Oh yeah. It's like whatever happened to crack cocaine now that Oxycontin's the drug of the day. Whatever happened to LSD? I even had to ask my granddaughter the other day. I said, "Well, do kids still take LSD? You never heard anything about it?" Oh yeah, they still do. So it's whatever the press pays attention to. The crime of the day. That's a good way to put that.
Right. So yeah, and then in the 1940s, at least in Milwaukee, that's when they decided that, oh, we should probably look into gambling, and they had a big investigation, and what here in Wisconsin, what we call a John Doe investigation, which other states it's sort of their equivalent of a grand jury. But anyway, he oversaw this thing called the Ogden Social Club, which confuses me because it was actually, they incorporated it. It's a legitimate thing that they have records for, but it was strictly gambling. It was roulette tables and everything else.
Yeah.
But what they would do is they would rotate where it was. It ended up getting busted in about a dozen different places within a few square blocks, under the idea that as long as you kept moving it, the fines would never go up, because the big fine was being the keeper of the house.
Yeah.
So if the keeper of the house is different every time, the fines never get that big.
Wow. Pretty slick.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely gambling was an interest of his early on, and pretty much for the rest of his life.
So what other kind of rackets did he get into in the kind of his earlier life? Did he start in with the Teamsters back in the 50s?
Probably. He definitely, I mean, he knew the Teamsters very early on. Joe Caminiti, who was a big union guy, was like the godfather of one of his sons. So he was definitely close with them early on. So I don't know at what point he started using them for things. I mean, that doesn't really come into attention until the FBI starts looking into it. So I'm not sure exactly when that started.
Interesting.
But yeah, definitely he was close with the right guys there. One of the major things that he was known for was being involved in coin operated machines, vending machines, and other things. And some of it is just a matter of fact that it's all coin operated. It was cash, so you didn't have to claim it, which that's always the big thing with crime, is you don't want to have to tell the government how much money you made.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing in cash, that's a bonus. So there's that. But then he would do strange things, like that wasn't enough. He would do strange things where he would buy old machines, put new siding on the machines, and then sell them back as if they were new machines. So it wasn't enough just to have machines in the bars all over town. He would then have to scam the machines themselves. It was very strange, but I guess any way to make a dollar, you'll take it.
Wow. So now it was by vending machines, but he had all the cigarette and the candy machines.
Yes.
And when soda machines started coming out, he had all them. Did he get into at one time? Did he do slot machines? Did they have a slot machine operation going? Usually out of those amusement companies, some part of that will be slot machines, video poker today. Did he get into that too?
Yeah, I mean, less so because it's not legal, so it wasn't ever a major part. Definitely more so jukeboxes and cigarette vending machines. And if you have a younger audience, the younger audience may not realize that once upon a time, cigarette machines were everywhere.
Yeah.
Every gas station, every supper club. I mean, they were everywhere.
And jukeboxes too.
And jukeboxes.
People don't realize there were jukeboxes everywhere.
Yeah, but cigarettes, like, was a big thing.
Yeah,
I don't know about other places, but around here it was very poorly enforced. If you wanted to send your 5-year-old kid to buy you a pack of cigarettes, you could do it. But it's ideal because if, say, somebody hijacks a truck of cigarettes, now you've got free product, plus you put it in a machine that you own and you mark up the price, and then whatever you make, you don't have to tell the government how much money you took out of the machine. So sometimes I tell people vending machines, and I'm like, that's a really stupid mob scam, but it's really not. It's actually incredibly clever.
Yeah. And when they weren't running stolen cigarettes from them, they weren't paying the tax on them. There's always a huge tax on cigarettes. If you take the tax off of cigarettes, they'd be about $1 a pack or less probably, but there's always been a big tax on them. So I know in Kansas City, that was one of their dodges, was to put them out when they were supposed to put a sticker on them to show that they paid the tax, and they would either counterfeit stickers or just put them out through the machines or the corner stores without paying the tax on them that they owed the state.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it usually wasn't like they were hijacking. They weren't hijacking trucks every other day, but it was fairly common to get trucks brought in from states like Virginia or North Carolina, where the taxes more or less don't exist. And just when you're driving that bulk amount, you can drive cross country and you're saving a significant amount of money just doing it that way.
Yeah, really. That almost came up to modern times now that there's, I think cigarette smoking is such at a low level, there's probably not much money to be made on that. So go ahead. Folks, we're going to take a little break out. The lights went out. Now they're back on, Gavin.
All right.
So that's kind of the typical racket. He's just like every other family and crime boss in the United States, practically, I think, especially in the Midwest, where how you make your different income streams, as we call it today, your passive streams of income, get those vending machines out and have a guy to run the route. And he carried a little further. He was kind of an interesting, colorful guy, Frank Balistrieri was. And his father-in-law is the boss of the crime family, and they have, a real deal mafia family. I assume they were all from Sicily, and
well, originally, yes,
originally, yeah. And so they only brought in new Sicilians, and he fit right in because his family was from Sicily, and probably had making ceremonies and the whole 9 yards. I'm seeing that throughout the whole United States as the FBI gets these making ceremonies actually recorded. They just released it. They recorded another one not too long ago. And that's about the third one, I believe. And or other people who have talked about their making ceremony. I had a guy on the show, Michael DeLeonardo, and he described in detail, and they're all the same, whatever city it's in, they're always the same. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I find it strange how uniform everything is nationwide when these are all apparently, individual groups, but they really do seem to all follow the same patterns.
Right. And now Balistrieri, or the Aliotto family in Milwaukee, they really didn't have a seat on the commission. I don't think was anybody from Milwaukee at the Appalachian meeting where they busted everybody. I know Nick Savella was there. He was on his way there. They got him at a train station on his way there. Was anybody from Milwaukee there? I don't think there was, but I can't remember.
My belief is no. I've seen things saying that that Frank was registered at a hotel nearby.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what the veracity of that claim is, because nobody from Milwaukee was caught there. Which as a researcher is unfortunate, because you love to have that connection. But no, I can't place anybody there.
They've always been so close to Chicago. The outfit is so powerful because of Al Capone on a national basis that they've kind of always been overshadowed. And some people would even say they're almost like another crew of the outfit. I don't know if I would go that far to make that claim. What would you think about that? I've
heard that, but I disagree as well.
Yeah, they had their own family with a boss. Now he would have been just like Nick Savella in Kansas City. He would have been subservient to whoever the boss was in Chicago. He would not have bucked him. I'm pretty sure of that. And I know Nick Savella even sent a little extra money up to him every once in a while to IUPA during the 70s. and he didn't really have to. It's kind of like he was kicking up a little bit to his big brother, shall we say, but you
Sure.
had your own separate family up there, just like we did down here. But how did he get into union racketeering then? You got any knowledge of the kind of the roots of that? I know in Kansas City, Nick Zabella groomed a guy who went up in the union, a guy named Roy Lee Williams, and he groomed him from early on and had control of him by the 60s. He pretty well had control of him by helping him out with, with heavies to do heavy work that the union wanted to put pressure on a company or to
Sure.
consolidate his position. How did that work in Milwaukee?
I think it's much more natural than that. I don't think it required anybody to be pushed too hard. In Milwaukee, the Teamster official, the head of Union 200 or Local 200, I should say, was a man named Frank Ranney. And Frank Ranney, he changed the spelling of his name, but he originally was a Sicilian himself. And I'm fairly certain that he was in from day one. So him and Balistrieri were friends, and Randy sat on the pension fund board. So I don't think it took a whole lot of work to get in on that.
I see. That's interesting. I did not know that before. I didn't really look into him big time, but I did, of course, mention him when I was did my film on the Skim Gangland Wire. And there's a FBI agent named Gary Magnuson who was assigned up there, and he told the story about his first connection between Frank Balistrieri and Frank Ranney. Now, he didn't go into the fact that Ranney was a Sicilian and changed his name. So that really, it makes sense now.
I don't know if that's well known, but yeah, his name was actually like Ranieri or something to that effect.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That now it really makes sense to me. But Gary Magnuson said he was following Balistrieri one day, and Balistrieri, he just got lucky. He followed him quite a ways, and he went out of town, and he met with some guy, and he got the license, got the tag number off that guy's car, and it came back to Frank Ranney. And then he looked into him. He probably maybe already knew he was a high-level Teamster. So that was kind of the FBI's first connection between Balistrieri and the Teamsters Union during that time. Gary's written a book called Straw Men that talks a lot. Have you read that? Have you seen that book?
Yes, absolutely.
Tells a lot about his experiences dealing with Balistrieri and the Milwaukee mob, and then he transferred to Las Vegas and then continued working on the Skim. So it's a pretty interesting book. But so Ranney then helped them get the Skim going. Tell us a little bit about Balistrieri and how he ran his more modern family in the Shorecrest Hotel. I've got some wiretaps of the Shorecrest Hotel. He had a lot of meetings down there. There was a restaurant, I believe. Did he have like offices there in the Shorecrest?
Yeah. So the Shorecrest was purchased by Frank's son, and I want to say it's 1971. Well, somewhere thereabouts. And there were offices, well, there still are offices on the ground floor of the hotel, and then the restaurant is on the ground floor. And his two sons were attorneys, so they would use the offices on the ground floor. And Frank would kind of make the restaurant, which at that time was called Snugs, would make that his hangout. This is before my time, but I'm told that apparently he had a nice dark booth in the back corner, and he had his own telephone line going to the booth and everything of that sort. So it's pretty neat. But yeah, Frank was interesting in that I don't think that he cared about the institution or the organization as a whole. I think he really wanted everything for himself. You'll notice that he brings in his closest family members, his brother, his sons, his in-laws, which isn't, out of the ordinary, but it sort of has the long-term effect of the family's going to die with him one way or another because he's just not expanding it out. He wants everything for himself.
Interesting. He was some of those wiretaps, and they're actually, it was a hidden microphone. They're really low quality, really poor quality, but there's one of them that they almost have to guess at what he's saying, but he's discussing after the skim, and we didn't really go into that yet. Maybe we should go into that just a little bit first, but I just have to tell you this, it popped in my head. He's talking about whether Lefty Rosenthal is a snitch or not. They were suspecting that he was a snitch after they served the search warrants, after the wiretaps and everything went down on exposing the skim out of Las Vegas that, of course, Balistrieri and Milwaukee and Kansas City and Cleveland and Chicago are involved in. So he and one of his sons are discussing Lefty, and his son saying, I don't know. I don't think he is. And Frank says, I don't know. He said, you squeeze a Jew, you get a snitch. Now, there's an all-time classic Mafia line there. You squeeze a Jew, you get a snitch.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about kind of the Milwaukee end of that skim. What do you know about that?
Well, I don't know if I want to talk it up too much because, I don't want to give them more credit than is necessary, but
yeah.
But I think Milwaukee is really a very crucial piece of it that is often forgotten or overlooked because they are the family that brought in Alan Glick, and Alan Glick, without Alan Glick, there is no, there's other skims, other families had other casinos, but as far as the Stardust and the other handful of casinos that the Midwest was playing with, Milwaukee's crucial to that.
Right. Now, do you know how Glick, now folks, Alan Glick, if you don't remember, he was referred to as the brain or the genius or Baldy sometimes in the wiretaps. He was a guy that started a company called Argent, and Argent bought the Stardust, the Hacienda, the Fremont, and the Frontier, I believe. They had 4 casinos, and he needed a big Teamsters loan to get that. And he started reaching around, and he somehow, now there's erroneous information out there, I believe, that he went to law school, because he'd gone to law school too with one of the Balistrieri boys, but I don't think that's right. I can't remember. Do you remember how he got his first introduction to Frank Balistrieri?
Sure. So first, I'm gonna comment on that. I'm glad that you mentioned that information is erroneous. Because in Nick Pelagi, hope I'm saying his name right, in his book Casino, it says that Alan Glick went to college with Joe Balistrieri, Frank's son, and there's a really easy way to show that that's not accurate, and that's that Joe Balistrieri went to Notre Dame, which is a Catholic university,
right? And
Alan Glick was Jewish, so he was not at Notre Dame. So that, I don't know where he got that information, but that is not accurate. Glick was a real estate developer in the San Diego area. Later on, he figured out that there was a way to make money developing land in Las Vegas. You could get a loan to improve the land, and then you would sell the land and make your money back just without even ever doing anything with the land. Just improving it, you could sell it, and you could make a big profit because the city was booming at that time.
Yeah.
But at some point along the way, he wanted to move from doing that to actually owning the casinos, because apparently he thought there was even more money to be made in the casinos. But he needed $63 million, which at that point in time was an obscene amount of money for him. I don't think that he had $1 million or $5 million to his name. So 63 million is quite a lot. And the exact details I'm a little fuzzy on, but somewhere along the way, he meets an attorney named Morris Shanker. And Morris Shanker sort of introduces him a couple steps along the way until eventually he introduces him to Frank Balistrieri. And he basically says, Frank's going to find you a way in. And again, because Frank Balistrieri knows Frank Ranney, who's on the pension fund, the details, like I said, are a little fuzzy because it depends who's saying what. A lot of this is coming from Glick testifying after the fact.
Yeah.
And I have some real doubts about Glick's honesty, but basically the story at that point goes that the Teamsters Fund gave him the loan, and Glick later on in his testimony always maintained that he had no idea who these guys were or why they gave him such a good loan. And I don't personally buy that. I can't believe for a second that at some point he didn't find this suspicious that they were willing to give him millions of dollars with really nothing to back it up. But that's what he claims. He claims he never knew that it was a mob thing until much too late.
Really. And then there was that deal about, and they found the piece of paper that he agreed to sell Balistrieri's sons the corporation for like $50,000, some obscenely low amount of money, and then
Yes.
and signed the paper even to help him, if they'd help him get this loan. So I mean, that was
Yeah, and I've seen the actual paper. It does exist.
right.
Yeah, they had an option agreement, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this, so I apologize if I am not supposed to say this, but even as recently as 5 years ago, even though Argent no longer exists, they were still talking about possibly trying to push the option through to try to get some sort of money out of that.
Get money out of Alan Glick, because he's ended up selling out, making a lot of money, and retiring, or not retiring probably, but he just died recently, actually, going back to San Diego and laying low, and testified against him, and ended up dying a natural death. So go figure that one. But I can see where they might want to take him into court trying to enforce that agreement, and then go get some proceeds from what he got when he sold Argent Corporation.
Right. Yeah. And as you said, Glick just recently died in the last few months. And I mean no disrespect to him or his family, but again, as a researcher, I am kind of excited about this, because for those people who don't know, the FBI doesn't release, generally speaking, doesn't release files on living people.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that there's some new angle that we never saw before that will come out because of this. Because as I sort of said a few minutes ago, I never really believed Glick's version of events. I think there's more going on there, and he more or less was just saying what the government wanted him to say to get the convictions. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's, well, I don't think he's as naive as he made himself out to be.
No, we're all going to cast ourselves in a good light when we tell our story. There's no doubt about it. And now the government will not challenge that too much if it supports their position, and he's willing to come and testify. So I can understand that. I don't think I know some of the people involved personally, and they're not corrupt, and that they would suborn perjury. But they made, he was going to definitely cast himself in the best light he could on that deal. Whether he could or he didn't know it, it probably was really hard to prove. It may be impossible to prove that he had some, actual agreement that, now I'm going to let Lefty Rosenthal skim money and send it back to you guys in exchange for your help in getting this loan. He probably never said those words out loud. Lefty was already working out there in the Stardust when he took it over. And they brought it now. Glick's story is they brought him back to Kansas City, and Nick Zavella threatened to kill him and said, you've got a man working for you out there who will pay us this money. So you just need to let him do what he needs to do. And Glick, there's no doubt, turned a blind eye to that. There's a lot of stories out there about how.
And I don't mean to suggest there was perjury involved, but just I think they didn't want to investigate him too much, because when you got a guy who can help you bring down 3 mob families, you're going to cut him some slack.
Yes, you are. I mean, and he did it. It was amazing. and never really suffered any consequences from it. So,
No,
so much
which
for
is
the
suspicious in
invincibility
itself.
of the mafia.
Yeah.
Everybody is confused, a little bit confused and amazed by that story, that he didn't suffer any consequences. But also, see, his testimony and that case came in kind of a pivotal time for the mafia in the entire United States, because in all the several different cities, large cities, they were using RICO and wiretaps,
Mhm.
and informants like him, storytellers like him, and the government was really putting the pressure on all the crime families in the United States, and they knew that to do anything while the cases were in progress was going to bring down even more heat. They had a heat already. And then by the end of it, all the heads of the families went down, by 85, 86. After the commission trials, they were just about all gone. It was, it changed so rapidly. And certainly in the Midwest by then, all those leaders of those crime families were gone. And so, I could see where it would happen, but so it's interesting. It is really interesting. I know I got another phone call where Glick calls to talk to Balistrieri after the search warrants were served. And he had been talking to these sons. They were comparing notes about how much money they got. And they were worried about this packet of money. And they knew where that packet of money might have came from. And they had this conversation. And you talk about like lightly fencing with each other about, are you okay? Am I okay? Are you okay? Am I okay? Yeah. And then hung up and never talked again. But he had a special connection with Balistrieri that, he didn't, Glick didn't call anybody else during that time. And they had wires on everybody and surveillance and everything. And he didn't call anybody else, but he did call Balistrieri just to see how he was, shall we say.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was that connection, but then even the two sons, the Balistrieri sons, not only do they have the option on Argent Corporation, but they were legal representatives of Argent. I mean, I know the one son specialized as in basically taxes. He was a financial attorney, and so he knew a lot about, not necessarily the skim. I mean, I don't want to say that he did or didn't, but he knew a lot about the day-to-day numbers of what was going on.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that.
So they were pretty well connected. Like I said, I don't think the Milwaukee end has really been explored to its fullest yet.
I know the brothers, their law firm was getting like, I want to say a $25,000 a month or $50,000 a month retainer. He was paying them pretty good money for representation, and they did charge them both for being part of the whole conspiracy, and they got found not guilty and convicted Frank, is my understanding. Is that, am I remembering that right?
You're going to put me on the spot there.
Yeah, that's all right.
No, both of the brothers did end up going to prison. They got sentenced to 8 years, but they ended up getting out in about 3 and a half.
But I'm not sure if it was.
I'm not sure if it was for that, because at the same time they were also on trial for extortion locally in Milwaukee. So the prison time might have just been for the extortion.
Okay. I'd have to look it up. So folks, if you want to
get. But they were all on trial. They did all go to prison. It's just, I'm not sure. Maybe they were spared the Vegas end of things. I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah, it might have copped a plea or something. I'm pretty sure I read that they did not. Only Frank went down for the actual skimming. I didn't remember anything about that.
And that could be. I should know that answer, but the details of what charges stuck and which didn't, I don't recall.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's kind of what happened to the Milwaukee family then after the skim trials and after Frank went down. It seemed like he died not that long. He did some time and come back out?
He did some time and he came back out, but yeah, I think you got that about right. Everybody, as you said, both in the Midwest, New York, all these families are getting taken down in the mid 80s. by the time Frank gets out, his health is in decline and he dies in 93. So he's not back out for very long.
Yeah.
And as near as I can tell, he really wasn't very active for the little bit he was back out. There's some debate on how much of a family there still was at that point. I tend to lean towards there really wasn't one. So it seems like that was kind of the end for them.
Kind of in modern times, I know there's some pretty much all over the United States, there's still some illegal poker machines and machines like that activity. I know there are some up in Wisconsin. No, law enforcement doesn't really take a look at it anymore on any level that I know of. I think it's kind of like marijuana. Why should you spend a lot of resources to investigate some vice activity that in 4 or 5 years is going to be illegal, or the government's going to run it? It's like the lottery. So I don't think anybody really pays any attention to it.
Right. Yeah. The video poker machines are funny. I don't know how other states work, but here there's sort of like this unspoken agreement that as long as you only have a handful of machines in your bar, we're not going to say anything about it.
Yeah.
If they walked in and they saw 10 machines, you'd get in trouble. But yeah, if you got like 3 machines, that's fine. And I don't know why that's okay, but I mean, everybody knows they're there and nobody does anything. So it's just sort of become accepted.
Interesting. All right. So really, basically, the entity known as the Milwaukee Mafia probably is no more. Would that be a safe statement? They even have any remnants of it? We have a slight remnant of the old Sabella family, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's my opinion. And I always have to put the disclaimer on that. Since the bulk of my information does come from FBI files.
Yeah.
The problem I have with that is then I've got very good information in the 1960s, pretty good in the 70s, and it gets spottier from there because of the fact that the living people don't have their records released. But I'm not sure who would have been around that is still around. I can't think of anybody who that would be. And the last mob, I mean, there's gang murders all the time, but the last actual mob murder wasn't since 1989. So Milwaukee's been pretty clean.
Yeah, we're about the same in Kansas City. I know some of these guys still meet, they still get together, they still know each other. Some of the younger guys have some things going on. One of them had a crew that was going around robbing drug dealers and some things like that. But a couple of guys were doing arsons for hire, but then they got popped. And so I don't know. There's not much going on. Certainly there's no, when they lost the Teamsters Union, they lost it all. If you think about it, Gavin, the Teamsters Union provides a crime family with political power, provide them with a stream of cash money income coming in from those casinos. It was really the foundation that the mob family stood on in the 60s, 70s, until they were taken down in the 80s. So that's just really not, they have to go back to rackets, go back to burglary and fencing things like that. And there's not that much money in that. There's a lot of money in narcotics, but there's too much competition out of the Mexican mafia and the cartels to ever get into that. They don't dare go head to head with those cartels in the drug trade.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And in Milwaukee, narcotics was never a major, which is really unusual, but it was never a major part. Yeah. By the 1980s, they got into cocaine, but I mean, they were very late to the game. Yeah. All the other families, even though they said they didn't deal in narcotics, we all know they did.
Yeah.
But in Milwaukee, I actually don't think they did. So yeah, they were very late to that game as well. So never really got a foothold.
All right. Well, Gavin, this has been great. Folks, this has been Gavin Schmitt on the Milwaukee Mob. Here, let's show you his books here. There's Milwaukee Mafia, more of a book of photos. Actually, I was approached by somebody to do one of those, by that company to do one of those for Kansas City. And at the time, I just didn't have the energy to do it. Nobody still hasn't done it. I don't know. Maybe I'll get the energy up to do that. And then,
and for what it's worth, they sell pretty good.
Yeah, well,
some people, no offense to them, but they're not readers, so they like that, like the visual.
I know. I've done one that's not a visual book. It's more a story of the skim, and from a kind of insider standpoint, from a guy that worked on the streets during that. But I know, and it doesn't sell very well. But those picture books, a friend of mine did one called Black Hand Straw Man about Kansas City Mafia activities. And it's a picture book. It's more like a coffee table book with a lot of images in it. It sells a lot better than mine does. So nobody's done it yet. Maybe I'll decide to do it. So
well, as long as you have the photos, that's the hard part. Yeah, so
I know. Well, I can get the photos. I don't have them right now. I've got a few, but I can get the photos. But boy, it's still, even then, even if you got the photos, it's a lot of work to do a book, even of that. How much support do they provide you doing that? Like, you get the photos and the text. Do they send you a template to put those into, or?
Yep. They give you the template. I mean, it's a real publishing company. They've got a marketing team and everything else
all over the United States, whether it's just about a city or about an area or about crime or whatever it is.
No, they were very good. And the editor was excellent, asked a lot of great questions. So I have nothing but nice things to say about them.
I don't know. I've finished my last movie. Maybe I hope my last documentary I've ever done. Those are a lot of work too. That's been 2 years making. So who knows? All right, folks, this has been Gavin Schmitt. Gavin, I really appreciate you coming on here.
I appreciate being asked. I mean, like I said, I've known about your podcast for years, so it's a real honor to be here.
Well, I was told about you probably 3 years ago. You had this book, and you had both those books. You were kind of the go-to guy, and I got distracted by New York and LA and Las Vegas and all the bigger spots, and I forgot about one of my brothers in smaller mob towns, is Gavin Schmitt and the Milwaukee crime family. So I really appreciate talking to you, and we'll get this information out to people. They all need to know about the Milwaukee Mafia, because it was an integral part. Even New York Mafia knows about you guys, because if you remember, Joe Pistone, acting as Donnie Brasco, and Lefty Ruggiero came back to try to influence a Milwaukee Mafia guy to help a local Milwaukee FBI agent who was working undercover to do. What were they going to do? They were doing some kind of video poker machines or something, if I remember right. And
that was, well, not video poker, but they were in the vending
area. So
do we want to get into that whole story?
How about we could. How much time we done here? You know that story pretty well. I know just enough to be dangerous. Okay, let's tell that story. We're gonna make this just a little bit extra long segment here. Tell us that story.
Okay, so I'll keep it simple. There's an FBI agent in Milwaukee, and his name was Gail Cobb, and he opens up a company called Best Vending, and he's going around trying to get vending machines in local restaurants and bars. I don't think he honestly cares if he succeeds or not. I think he just is doing it to try to get the attention of Frank Balistrieri, which he succeeds at. And sort of what happens is they end up having to sit down. They go to the restaurant, they have a conversation. And by the end of the conversation, similar to the option on Las Vegas, there's an option now to buy into this vending machine company this guy has set up, even though there's nothing in this company. Like, he's not very successful, but this is just something they do, is these options. So they've now got part of this, but the guy wasn't making very much headway. So he calls, or through the FBI, but somehow they get a hold of Joe Pistone, Johnny Brasco, and Donnie talks to his mob guy, Lefty Ruggiero, and Lefty is like, oh yeah, I can get you guys in there. And it becomes this very convoluted thing where Lefty has to talk to his man in New York. His man in New York knows a guy in New Jersey. The guy in New Jersey knows a guy in Rockford, Illinois. And the guy in Rockford, Illinois knows Frank Balistrieri. So Lefty has no idea who any of these Milwaukee guys are, but apparently through the grapevine, they were able to trace it back. And the guys in Rockford were like, yeah, those New York guys are good. So they flew out and they were able to kind of set things up. So yeah, I put the cart before the horse there. Like before they sit down and they had this option, they had to have the New York guys fly in and kind of vouch for him. Right. But yeah, that's the other thing they ended up, like I said earlier, the Sons ended up getting in trouble for extortion. This is the extortion they end up getting in trouble for, because the government says that they sort of forced this option upon him and were sort of threatening and that matter to take over this business. They were trying to prove that they were trying to take over all the vending in the Milwaukee area. And they were having limited success on that, because every time they went to somebody and they asked them, they said, well, yeah, we have Frank's machines, but it's never been a problem. So they couldn't get people in the bars and restaurants to actually say that they were forced to carry that line of machines. Mm-hmm. And you could take that either way. Either they didn't want to say, or maybe he just was a really good operator. Yeah. But that's the short version of it is the FBI tried to get in that way as well. And it did work, since they ended up getting convicted on it.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't remember the story exactly. But that's a really, I love that, how they made their connections to get vouched for. And Ruggiero acts like he can know somebody, but he really doesn't, because he always, if I remember right, he always wanted to act like he could do anything. He was Mr. Mafia. So you got to go to
yeah. I mean, he's famous
guys
now. He's famous now because of the Donnie Brasco story, but he's really a nobody.
He's a nobody. Yeah, he really was. You know, I did a story, I had a guy on that was in the penitentiary with him, and I got some statements from Joe Pistone about what a pain in the ass he was, and how he was always whining and crying and mooching stuff, and this guy said he was in the penitentiary with him. He said he was the same way in the penitentiary. So all right, well, great. One last story, folks. Make give you a little bonus here for this episode. Don't forget to hit me up on Venmo at Gangland Wire, and go to the website and go to the donate page. I've got a book out there, just like Gavin's got some books we talked about, the Milwaukee Mafia, mobsters in the, all of a sudden I can't remember the.
In the heartland. Like I said, not crazy about the subtitle, but search Milwaukee Mafia and you'll find me.
Mine is Leaving Vegas, the true story of how FBI wiretaps ended mob domination of Las Vegas casinos. Now that's a mouthful too, but I just gave up, man. It just, I don't know. You wear me down here. Just get some kind of a title and get it out there. Throw it up on Amazon for sale and get it to Kindle. So it's been great talking to you, Gavin, and I look forward to talking to you again one of these days, maybe.
All right. I'm always glad to be back if you have me, Gary. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye. All right. That was great, Gavin. That'll be a good show and give people a little interest. Although I tell you what, when I put stuff up out of the smaller mob families, I don't get quite as much attention to the show as when you put John Gotti's name up there and Al Capone's name, and you get more listens, likes, and all that. I have a friend of mine that's connected to the Mob Museum, and he was telling, and he does some blogging for the Mob Museum, and he said that they found the top 3 clickbait people were Lucky Luciano. I think Al Capone was number 1, and John Gotti and Lucky Luciano. Those names, if they were up in the title, they got more clicks out of those names than anything else. So
no, that's a complaint I've been saying since day one. I could write the 50th book about Al Capone, probably the 100th book about Al Capone,
Yes,
and say absolutely nothing new, and I
no.
would sell better than what I'm doing. But
And there's
I
people
don't
that do
want to
stuff
do
like
that.
that too, especially on blog pieces. They take something and just rewrite it a little bit, throw it up. I've done a little rewriting myself to help mine. I try to throw some original stuff in there, but mine
Yeah,
show notes and everything. So good writing's hard, as you know. It's not
yeah,
writing, it's rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. I've been kind of started working on a book that's more of kind of put me in it personally about uh, what the hell? That's weird. Glad that didn't come on. I get these strange Skype calls every once in a while from girls, I think usually. So
Oh,
some kind of a, uh, scam thing. But I started writing a book, kind of putting me in it. I did a movie about it, about the Balistrieri War. But so I've got a lot of people already recorded their remembrances of that. So I've got pictures and a lot of research done. But boy, to sit down and write about that for a book is, boy, that's hard. It's just, God,
yeah.
I sit and write. And then I don't feel like I've done anything. That's all crap. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Oh no. Yeah, the one that we've been talking about, the Milwaukee Mafia book, I would rewrite that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't ever read, like I hardly ever listen to my podcast.
Yeah. I
look
think
at
I've
your
gotten
homework.
better, but when I go back and I see the first book, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, we all feel that way. All right, Gavin, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey,
Have-
like I said, if you find it in your, very easy for you, I don't want you to do a lot of work, shoot some video with your camera of that short crest, and maybe even step inside the restaurant and just
Yeah.
describe what you're shooting in there. I'll sit down and write some text up and throw it down underneath, and probably throw a couple of things in from this under it. So of you talking about it.
Sure.
So, okay.
I can do that.
All right. I just, throw it up on Google and Google Drive or whatever you use, Dropbox or whatever you use, and send me a link, and I'll help use that with my Chicago mob tour.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right,
great.
Gavin, good talking to you.
Good talking to you. Bye.